Okay, welcome to the Desai Academy. Today we will discussing about the class 10th chapter number 6 life process. Okay, you want remaining videos of this chapter means we are given the link given in the description. Okay, one time you have to check. So next we will discussing about the animals have evolved. Animals have evolved different organs for the uptake of oxygen from the environment and for getting rid of carbon dioxide produced. Okay, animals have evolved different types of system for uptaking of oxygen as well as the removal of carbon dioxide from body. Okay, terrestrial animals can breathe the oxygen in the atmosphere, but animals that live in water need to use oxygen dissolved in water. Okay, animals which are lived in the land or terrestrial animals, they use the oxygen from the atmosphere easily, but as the animals living in water, they will takes the oxygen from the dissolved from water. Okay, here since the amount of dissolved oxygen is fairly low compared to the amount of oxygen in the air, the rate of breathing in aquatic organism is much faster than seen in terrestrial organism. Here one question arises here: why aquatic organism having faster breathing rate? Question arises here: why aquatic organism having faster breathing rate means so the amount of oxygen, the amount of dissolved oxygen, from this you can write so from up to listen. So what is here? Animals that live in water need to use the oxygen dissolved in water. Okay, animals that live in water need to use the oxygen dissolved in water. So since the amount of oxygen dissolved, since the amount of oxygen is dissolved, oxygen is very low fairly compared to the oxygen present in air. Okay, the amount of dissolved oxygen in air is the amount of oxygen is fairly low compared to the amount of oxygen in air. So the amount of air present in air is more compared to the amount of oxygen present in a water. So that is why the aquatic organism having a faster breathing rate. Why aquatic organism having faster breathing rate means you can write the amount of oxygen dissolved in water is fairly low compared to the amount of oxygen in atmosphere, so they are having a faster breathing rate. Means the simply we can say that the amount of oxygen is more in land, so the amount of oxygen is less in water, so that is why they are having faster breathing rate. That much how to write. Okay, what you write? The amount of dissolved oxygen is fairly low compared to the amount of oxygen in the air. The rate of breathing rate in aquatic organism is much faster than that seen in terrestrial organism. That much how to write for the question. What is the question here? Why aquatic organism having faster breathing rate? Okay, here fishes take in water through the air mouths and force it pass through the gills, where it dissolved oxygen is taken up by the blood. Okay, fishes are taking the water through their gills, and the gills absorb the water molecules, and that water molecules is passed through the different parts of the body with the help of blood. Okay, so fishes taking the water through their mouths and pass it to the gills. Okay, first the fish are taking the water from the mouth. The gills will makes the separation of oxygen and hydrogen. The oxygen is absorbed by the blood and passes through the remaining parts of the body, and hydrogen is removed from the body with the help of gills part of the fish. Okay, that fish is a fish having the gills that absorbs the oxygen in the blood, and the removal of the hydrogen is taking place in the gills. Okay, in aquatic organism like a fish. Okay, next, terrestrial organism use the oxygen in the atmosphere for respiration. For terrestrial animals, they directly absorb the oxygen from the atmosphere. Okay, for their respiration. This oxygen is absorbed by different organs in different animals. Okay, this absorption of oxygen from the atmosphere is different for different organism, and they also use the different organs for the absorption of oxygen from the atmosphere. Okay, all these organs have a structures that increases the surface area which is contact with the oxygen rich atmosphere. So that all organisms having a different structure, different organ for the absorption of oxygen means, so there should be contact with what environment or a contact with the oxygen. Okay, all organisms having different organs for the absorption of oxygen means that different organ, that organ should be contact with the oxygen or atmosphere, we can say that. Okay, since the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide has to be takes place across the surface, the surface is very fine and delicate. Okay, that organ is what contact with the atmosphere for transportation of oxygen as well as the and carbon dioxide means that surface is very fine as well as the delicate. Okay, they may be very sensitive as well as the delicate or fine, we can say that. Okay, that surface, because that surface only the organism making the exchange of carbon dioxide as well as the intake of oxygen. So that surface is very important to the any organism, so that is very fine and delicate. Okay, so that have to be delicate and fine means it is have to be protected for survival of the organism. In order to protect this surface, it is usually placed within the body. So there have to be passage that will take care this area. Okay, here that much it is important for the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide means, so it should be protected from the external environment. So that should be placed inside the body or in order to protect. Okay, so means they are delicate, they should be protected means, so there should be what a transportation medium is involved, so they can transfer easily carbon dioxide and oxygen in the body. So there have a passage that will take air this area. So in addition there is a mechanism for moving the air in and out this area where oxygen is absorbed. So some area is there that in that the system is there means some place should be present that exchanging of gases should be takes place in the body or observed. Okay, in human beings air is taken into the body through the nostrils. Okay, for example compared to the human beings or comparing to human beings, the air is firstly taken through the our nostrils. Okay, the air is entering in nostrils and the air passes through the nostrils is filtered by fine air hairs that line the passage. Okay, we are taking the air from the atmosphere with the help of nostrils. Again our nostrils having a fine hairs in it because it will filter the air, so that air having what some small dust particles and other undisturbed or a very unwanted substance in it, so that should be harmful to your lung system, so that should be removed and cleaned. So that should be done by our hairs in our nose. Okay, that nose will cleanse the air from dust particles. Okay, and that will pass us through the next section. Okay, what is the purpose of hairs in our nose means that will cleanse or filters the what air from the air. Okay, what we taken from the atmosphere. The passage is also lined with a mucus which helps in the process. Okay, that passage, okay, from the nostrils, that having also in that nostrils are having what some mucus that also helps in the process of filtration of air. Okay, this also helps. From here, the air passes through throat and into the lungs. After this, they will pass it into the throat and will pass to the ultimately lungs. Okay, from the throat and it will goes to the lungs ultimately. Here, the air is now goes to the throat into the next to the lungs. Okay, now through the lungs. So rings of cartilage. Okay, the passage also lined with helps in the process. From here, the air passes through the throat and into the lungs. The rings of cartilage are present in the throat. These ensures that air passage does not collapse. Here, one important question comes here. What is the function of rings of functions of rings of cartilage means we can write rings of cartilage are rings of cartilage are present in the throat. These ensures that air passage does not collapse. This is the functions of rings of cartilage. Okay, this ensures that okay, this is the functions of rings of cartilage. Rings of cartilage are present in the throat. This ensure that air passage does not collapse. Okay, what is the meaning of this means? So the continuous passage of carbon dioxide and oxygen is continuously passing through the lungs. That is done by what? Rings of cartilage. There is no breaking of air, okay, in the lung system. Okay, that is taken by the what? Rings of cartilage. Okay, this mainly basically it maintains the continuous flow of carbon dioxide as well as the oxygen. Okay, that is care taken by the rings of cartilage. Again, very important this much. This question, what is the rings of, what is the function of rings of cartilage means you can write from this point to this much. Okay, okay, this is our human respiratory system. Okay, this is our human respiratory system. So this will be asked for your exam 2 mark question. Okay, so we can name the parts. This is the diaphragm and ribs muscles, lungs, rings of cartilage, rings of cartilage, trachea, nasal cavity or nasal passage, so mouth cavity, pharynx, larynx, so these are called alveoli, so bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli sac. Okay, these are the parts of parts of the respiratory system. Okay, within the lungs, the passage divides into smaller and smaller tubes, which finally terminates in balloon-like structure, which are called as alveoli. Okay, this is an important question. Again, what is alveoli means? We can write the within the lungs. Within the lungs, the passage divided into smaller and smaller tubes. Okay, within the lungs, the passage divided into smaller and smaller tubes are called as and that are terminated as a balloon-like structure as called as alveoli. The tubes are divided into smaller and smaller tubes and they are terminating in balloon-like structure are called as what? Alveoli. Okay, this is how to write. Okay, what is alveoli means you can write the passage divided into smaller and smaller tubes which terminate balloon-like structure is called as alveoli. Okay, the alveoli provide surface where the exchange of gases take place. Okay, again remember that which part of the human respiratory system exchange the gases means you can easily write alveoli. So the alveoli makes the exchange of gases in human respiratory system. This is the major part. Okay, this will exchange the carbon dioxide from the cell of the body to the outside and from the environment to the inside of the cell of oxygen. So that outtake of intake of oxygen and removal of the carbon dioxide is taken from the surface of alveoli only. Okay, remember that point. The walls of the alveoli contain an extensive network of blood vessels. Okay, that again these alveoli are surrounded by extensive network of blood vessels, means they are surrounded with blood vessels. Okay, as we seen in earlier years, when we breathe in, we left our ribs and flatten our diaphragm. When we breathe in, so we lift our ribs and flatten the diaphragm. Okay, this is the diaphragm. Okay, this diaphragm. Okay, or lift our ribs. Okay, lift, this is the ribs and this is the diaphragm. Okay, we lift we lift our ribs and flatten the diaphragm. So and the chest cavity becomes large as a result. Okay, when we breathe in means we lift our rib muscles and flatten our diaphragm, and the chest cavity becomes large as a result. We are breathing in means our chest cavity becomes large and the rib muscles are okay get flat. The rib muscles are lifted and that diaphragm is flattened. Okay, and the chest cavity becomes larger. Because of this, air is sucked into the lungs and fills the expanded alveoli. So large the chest cavity becomes large and diaphragm becomes flat and lift ribs are lifted. Okay, that time the air is sucked in the lungs and expanded the alveoli. In that case, the air is sucked in the lungs and fills the expanded alveoli. Okay, the air is sucked in the alveoli. Okay, the blood brings carbon dioxide from the rest of the body. Okay, and for releases into the alveoli, and the oxygen is okay for blood. The blood will takes the carbon dioxide from all cells of the body and passes are thrown in the alveoli. Okay, the blood brings carbon dioxide from the rest of the body. Again blood will taking the carbon dioxide blood and release it into the alveoli. Okay, and the oxygen in alveolar air is taken up with the blood, and in the alveolar blood vessels to be transported to all cells in the body. First blood will makes the takes the carbon dioxide from all cell of the body and passes through the alveoli, and that blood will takes the oxygen from the alveolar, and that will passes through the each and every cell of the body. This is the function of blood in the respiratory system. Okay, first it will pass the carbon dioxide from taken from the all cells of the body and passes through the alveoli, and again that oxygen is present in the alveolar and taken up by the blood, and that blood absorbs the oxygen and passes through the each and every cell of the body. Okay, during the breathing cycle, when air is taken in and out, let it out, the lungs always contain a residual volume of air, so that there is a sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed for the carbon dioxide to be released. Okay, here while the transportation taking place or exchange of gases taking place, or carbon dioxide is removing from the body and uptake of oxygen is taking place, that time our respiratory system having a residual volume, means some amount of volume of air is present in the lung system. Okay, there is no 0% of oxygen in the body. There is no 0% of oxygen in the body. Some little bit amount of air is present in the body up to until the fresh air is come into your body. Okay, that means it having a residual volume. So there is no complete zero or nil of the oxygen in our body. Okay, so until that new fresh oxygen is come into the lungs, at that time our body having the some little bit of okay oxygen in it. Okay, this is called as the residual volume. Okay, there is no zero of oxygen in the body. Okay, while we are saying that there is a transportation taking place, means our body having a zero oxygen, means so that is not happening here. So our body will prevent that having some amount of water, some amount of oxygen is there, so that will having the capable until the new fresh air is coming into the lungs. Okay, that having little bit amount of oxygen in it. So when the body size becomes large, okay, when the body size becomes large or a multicellular organism, the diffusion process alone cannot take care of oxygen delivered to all parts of the body. Okay, here as the organism becomes more complicated, the diffusion process is not sufficient method to pass the oxygen to each and every cell of the body. Okay, that time the organisms use the different method. Okay, instead of respiratory pigments take up oxygen from the air in the lungs and carry to tissues with each which are different, which are deficiency in oxygen before releasing it. Okay, so diffusion process, we already know that the diffusion process is it is a insufficient to supply the oxygen to each and every cell in multicellular organism. So that time that organism uses this special kind of method called as the respiratory pigment. So these respiratory pigments transfer the oxygen in each and every cell of the body. Okay, and it will release this where it is deficient of oxygen is there. Okay, by what? Respiratory pigments. Okay, these what respiratory pigments means, for example in our human beings also are multicellular organisms, so that are not uses the diffusion process. So we here pigment will having the function. Okay, that pigment is called as what? Hemoglobin, we can call that. Okay, in human beings the respiratory pigment is hemoglobin, which has a very high affinity for oxygen. Okay, multicellular organisms they do not use the diffusion for transportation of oxygen, means they uses the respiratory pigment. For example here humans, so in human beings the respiratory pigment will transport the oxygen from each cell of the body. Okay, that having what? More affinity towards oxygen. Affinity means attraction. Okay, the hemoglobin having a more attraction power towards oxygen. This pigment is present in the red blood capsules. Okay, hemoglobin is present in what? Present in the red blood capsules. Okay, RBC. Carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than oxygen, and hence it is mostly transported in dissolved from in our blood. Okay, the carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than oxygen. Okay, carbon dioxide is more soluble in water and then oxygen, so it is carbon dioxide is passed through the dissolved form in a blood. Okay, so this is how the transportation taking place in human beings. Okay, human beings by the help of respiratory pigments the blood that oxygen is passes through each and every cell of the body. Okay, this yellow box is given here. If the alveolar surface were spread out, it would cover about 80 meter per square. Okay, if the total alveolar present in the lungs that should be spread out in a surface area, means that will covers how much? 80 meter per square. That much it will covers on a surface. Okay, how much do you think the surface area of your body is? Consider how efficient exchange of gases becomes because of the large surface available for the exchange to take place. Okay, there is a surface area is larger to pass the gases. Okay, here if the diffusion were to be move oxygen in our body, okay, in multicellular organism uses the diffusion process to pass the oxygen. It takes estimated that it takes the nearly 3 years. Okay, by the multicellular organism diffusion process is used for the transportation of oxygen, means it will take nearly 3 years for a molecules of oxygen to get our feet get to our toes from our lungs. Okay, so the oxygen is passing from lungs to the our toes by the process of diffusion, means it will nearly take how many years? It will take 3 years. Okay, it will take 3 years to reach toes from the lungs. So how many years? 3 years. By which process? Diffusion. Okay, by the diffusion process the oxygen is reaching from lungs to the toes, means it would nearly take 3 years. Okay, so aren't we glad we are having a hemoglobin? Due this that time we are having what? A respiratory pigment called as the hemoglobin that will transfer a fraction of a second. Okay, so here that by the diffusion, means it will take nearly 3 years. Okay, So we'll next study about the transportation. So please subscribe my channel and share with your friends, also comments. Okay, so thank you for watching.